Change Radio for giving me this opportunity to help bring awareness and education to the community regarding domestic abuse and related subjects. I have the good fortune to coordinate Project Sarah, which stands for Stop Abusive Relationships at Home for Jewish Family and Children's Service of Southern New Jersey. We stress education, outreach, and provide many resources and services which will be highlighted throughout the year. I also volunteer for the Domestic Violence Response Team, which works for victims of Voorhees and Berlin Township. Our first guest is Kathy Freiss. I met Kathy when I was training to be an advocate. Kathy spoke to our class about human trafficking, and it was incredibly enlightening. I'm excited that she will be my first guest on my show, Love Shouldn't Hurt. Let's give a warm welcome to Human Trafficking Program Director, New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice, Office of the Attorney General, Kathy Freiss.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Kathy. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
My first question to you, because I'm sure most of the audience doesn't realize what human trafficking is. I think most people think of the drama, like the movie Taken, and I would like to know if you could define human trafficking for us.
Absolutely. So New Jersey defines human trafficking as and I do like to read it only because it is a legal piece, and words are very, very important. So New Jersey defines human trafficking as the recruitment, luring, holding, or receipt of persons by any means for the use of forced labor or services, or engaging in commercial sexual activity through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So what's important about the definition is the piece about the recruitment and the luring, how the person is taken, if you will, or gained control over in the first place. That can be through any means. It's often referred to as boyfriending. So a young person is in the mall and an older guy goes up to a young girl and pretends that he is interested in her.
Right.
You know, she's cute, he wants to get to know her, and they swap cell phone numbers and they start chatting, so forth and so on. So and it's interesting because you brought up the movie Taken, and I do usually show it.
Right.
I didn't know how that was going to go the first time that I used it, but it does seem to really make an impact with people, because in the movie Taken, she is brutally kidnapped and clearly taken against her will.
Right.
This is not anything she was looking for, had any idea about, and then kept doing that through heavy drug use.
Right.
and so forth, and so, taken to Thailand and
Right.
the whole 9 yards. That's not what we usually see.
Well, is there human trafficking in New Jersey? Most people think, listen, it's not happening in our backyard.
Absolutely. To both questions, it is happening in New Jersey, and there are still a lot of people out there who don't believe that it's happening in New Jersey. We started our New Jersey's Human Trafficking Task Force in 2005. And since then, we've been training and presenting and sharing education and awareness about human trafficking. And initially, it really, really was a tough sell. I don't know any other way to say it.
Who are you selling it to? Who are you trying to educate on?
Well, initially, we were educating and training law enforcement. And of course, that's ongoing and will be ongoing. But we were also, going into the community and, different organizations, really anyone who wanted to hear about human trafficking. Honestly, in the beginning, I was banging on the doors, saying, please let us come and share this information with you. And some people were open-minded enough to say, yes, I've heard a little bit about it, come in, maybe we need to hear about this.
Yeah.
And then there were other folks who said, well, this doesn't happen here, so why do we need to know it? That has changed. I am very, very happy to say.
Yeah.
People do acknowledge that it's happening, and they acknowledge that it's happening here in our own backyards. There have been many cases that have been in the news lately and throughout the years. In 2002, in fact, it was a federal case, but it happened in Plainfield, New Jersey. And for anyone who's researching human trafficking, you most likely will learn about that particular case because it's just very significant for two main reasons. One, it was one of the first cases federally prosecuted under the federal law, Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And two, it was the case that showed people that this does happen in our own backyards, not just in New Jersey, but in anyone's backyard, because that was where it was happening, in a little community in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Right. Well, interesting. I did Google human trafficking today, and right away up came an article from March 16th this year. A Voorhees man was charged in Deptford with human trafficking. They were at a hotel in Deptford, and a 26-year-old woman from South Carolina was able to escape and call 911. She had been forced every day to perform sex acts on men for money. He would beat her if she didn't obey. And the prosecutor's office said that they had seen numerous injuries on her consistent with her story. And it states in here, I found this on NJ.com, the new human trafficking law provides a valuable tool for law enforcement to vigorously prosecute those who engage in this type of exploitation. And they were saying, the chief of Gloucester was saying, human trafficking is not just an urban issue. As a result, law enforcement agencies statewide are working together in an effort to combat this crime. So you were telling me that you were getting ready tomorrow to speak with hotels?
A security briefing.
So how is that part of how New Jersey is trying to help people in the industry recognize human trafficking going on?
So when we first started, we had 3 goals, and that was education, collaboration, and prosecution. Education, obviously, because you can't find what you don't even know exists.
Right. You need to see the red flags.
You need to be able to see it. So training for years, that's what we did. Awareness, so forth and so on. Because we also had some time that we needed for it not to be a tough sell anymore.
Right.
You know, just like domestic violence.
Right.
Years it took to change a mindset.
Right.
That even though a man or a woman is alone in a home with a door that not locked,
right,
and therefore he could easily leave, but doesn't. So, and to understand what that kind of psychological control is. So we knew that this was going to need that time to for people to acknowledge that kind of control,
right,
in this regard as well. We also started to realize that because it is so huge, and because everyone should know about human trafficking, every community member, because we all have the eyes and the ears of our communities.
right,
And we need to create this army of first responders, if you will.
right.
So obviously law enforcement is the very first line of that, and they have ongoing trainings, in-service trainings. There's an online training that's always available to them. There's conferences, and so that will always be.
You know what really struck me when I went to the Human Trafficking Summit this past year was hearing the police officers speak. And they said how they're trained differently to look at people that are coming in who are typically labeled prostitutes.
Mhm.
That so many of these people
Mhm.
are victims of human trafficking, that they are now trying to look at these people as victims, treat them as victims, not as criminals,
Correct.
and try to reach out to them, give them the resources, and hope that they will, try to step forward. But the police also talk about how difficult that is because it's so psychological, and that mostly these women are really taught that the police are the enemy, and that the people that are boyfriending them are the only people that have their back, basically. So law enforcement is up against so much because it's that emotional barrier they have to break through. So
Sure, it's there are a lot of people out there who do not want to be called a victim, and they're very adamant about it. So if law enforcement believes that they're seeing all the signs of human trafficking, if that person who is being victimized or who is being trafficked does not want to agree that he or she is being trafficked, then this is why these cases are so incredibly difficult. People often ask, why aren't there more prosecutions? Well, if it doesn't get to that point where the victim is agreeable to, at least help to some degree, then there is no case. Your case starts with the victim, and it will all be ongoing with the victim, because even if it gets to a prosecution, that victim will need services ongoing, most probably for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So that is another challenge that law enforcement has, that victim service providers have. Fortunately, with a new directive and a passing of new legislation, which created the Human Trafficking Protection and Prevention Treatment Act, and that allowed for us to create a grant award that was awarded to a victim service agency to provide services statewide for victims of human trafficking specifically.
Right.
And to help and try to develop greater resources, really long-term resources, because that is what is lacking as well.
Right, so many of these victims will suffer from PTSD, and that will
Absolutely.
last so long.
Absolutely.
And then another barrier that I learned was, if it does get to trial, depending on the court or the knowledge of that area, oftentimes they won't be treated as a credible witness.
Well, that comes back to education and awareness.
Right.
A few years ago, someone said to me, well, aren't we moving on from that? Like, haven't we done? No, not until every single person understands what it is and what it can look like.
Right.
Because if it's not looking like the girl in Taken.
Right, because it could be a drug addict, and it could be she was put on drugs and kept that way to be beholden to her.
A 13-year-old who ran away with a guy because she was flattered that he was paying attention to her. We don't know what's going on inside people's heads, especially young people. We were all there once, so we have some sort of an idea, but it's very easy for them to be lured by certain things, and traffickers are really clever. Even though that's a nice thing to say about someone, they are actually really clever in picking out the most vulnerable.
Right.
And that's another thing that I try to emphasize a lot when I do my presentations, because I think we can all relate to that to some extent at some point in our lives.
And I was told that these predators don't even like to be called pimps anymore. They like to be called street psychologists. Because, as you said, they can pick out the people that will be the most vulnerable,
Right.
and boyfriend them and make them think that they are the most special, and then
Absolutely.
gradually get them
Absolutely.
into a bad situation. And it could also be couples. We had the privilege of having a very brave young woman speak at the summit, and she said how when she stepped off the bus
Right.
to a busy city,
Right.
this couple took her in.
Right.
But unbeknownst to her, it was really a pimp and someone else that he was
Right.
holding. But they portrayed themselves as a couple, so it could be something that seems very harmless. It's not the bad guy with the big zebra hat and
No.
the fur coat anymore.
And that's another reason why we do emphasize that whole recruitment part. Traffickers will often use other people to recruit for them, because they may not be the best at that part of it.
Right.
Once their sort of the control is established, then, you know, the pimp or the
They're
trafficker,
dependent.
or, you know, depending, you know, or, you know, it could be a farm camp owner if it's a victim of forced labor. But the recruiter is that person, if it's a guy and he's trying to pick up a young girl or lure a young girl, so he's going to be good looking, he's going to know how to talk, he's going to know what to say that's going to get their attention and kind of lure them in. So they're very good at that.
Right.
They're just very, very good at that. But I know we were talking about, you know, training, you know, who we're training. We, over the past year, we've known for a while that we needed to recruit, increase our first responders.
Right.
Because anyone can be a first responder, literally anyone.
Right.
All of us. So we started with,
Just like everyone in New Jersey is a mandated reporter. If you see,
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And why not utilize that?
right.
You know, I mean, who knows your neighbors better than you?
Right.
So we have started to put out a hotel training. We developed a training DVD in English and Spanish that can be used by hotel management to show to all their staff. For example, who knows someone's behavior better than housekeeping?
Right.
I mean, I can't even imagine the things that they can see and they
Right.
do see. Now, you know, that's the gap we need to fill in. So, for whether it's law enforcement or a business owner, a hotel, airports, I've been meeting with the airport security managers and so forth. The vendors there, you know, if someone's being brought in by plane, if she's not or he's not identified on the plane, she or he will then be walking through thousands of people.
Right.
So if just one person out of that whole group knows what to look for and sees something that doesn't look right, and that's the whole thing.
Is there a number to call? Because
Yes.
obviously you don't want to put yourself in danger. And
Absolutely,
intervene.
absolutely. First thing to do, if it's that kind of a situation, a dangerous situation, always 911, always 911. If it's a matter of, well, you know, I think I'm seeing this, I'm not sure, this is what it looks like, this is what's happening. We have an 24/7 hotline number, and that's 855-NJHT. So 855 and NJHT.
So that's to end New Jersey human trafficking.
Correct.
And NJHT.
Correct. We did a mass media campaign over this past year. And the message is to know it, see it, and report it. Again, understanding that we can't identify or help victims until we understand what it is.
Right.
And then once we do, if we see it, then what do we do with that information? Where do we go? Call the hotline. So that has been something we've been promoting, and it really has been great. We're getting calls. We got a call from a airport employee to a DV shelter because they didn't know where else to call. They
DV, domestic violence shelter.
I'm sorry, yes. And but they told the person, the intake person, that they thought it might be trafficking or domestic violence, and as we know, they're very much, interconnected.
Right.
Also, one of our detectives that answers the hotline got a call from a hotel clerk who witnessed two young girls who came in and were asking how much rooms were. There was a guy, much older guy, in a parking lot who would not come in. The girls would go out and say something to him, and they would come back in.
Right.
So they called the hotline, and they were able to intervene. And yeah,
That's amazing.
That's what you do this for,
Yeah.
All
that hard work,
awesome.
and you save those two girls, and it makes it all worth it.
It's just so great that people are starting to identify.
Well, speaking of saving victims, or we can also call them survivors.
Yes.
What went on with the Super Bowl? Why was the Super Bowl highlighting human trafficking?
Well,
and I did hear that some teens were rescued.
Yeah. There has been a long-standing belief that any major event, especially sporting event, that draws thousands and thousands of, to some degree, party goers. I'm sure, not to say anything about, football fans. I'm sure there are many people that do just go for the game, but there's a lot of parties and events that go on the whole week before and, up to the day. So,
and people invite strippers and hookers, and they think they're just having fun and that they're there willingly, and they don't think the obvious that this might be someone's daughter, but that this could be someone held against their will.
Right.
They're not in that mindset.
Exactly right. Right. They're just there to have a good time.
Right.
So, when we knew that it was coming to New Jersey, we went to the previous host, which was Indiana. Now, we have to keep in mind, too, that everything we do in New Jersey is statewide, because that's how we're set up.
Right.
But most other states, it's within a city limit. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah. Which makes it, I think, maybe a little bit more doable to some degree. But we do have the 21 counties here. So we went to them thinking they've just gone through it, and they did a anti-trafficking strategy to prepare for it, so forth and so on. So we brought them in, and they shared with us their information and different strategies that they used. We also used a organization called Class Kids, and they search for missing kids.
And I know this was years in the making. It's not like you did this a couple months beforehand. As soon as you knew.
Right. We started talking and listening and learning, and those who've been there and done it, and even the lessons learned, the things that they did that didn't work.
Right.
That's priceless.
Very
really.
Yeah.
We also held a stakeholder symposium in June of 2013. So that brought major stakeholders to the table. We had about 200 people that came, and to be sure that they, understood that, what human trafficking was,
Right.
And then different ways that we could help combat it. So everything that was done leading up to the Super Bowl was done with the mindset that it would be sustainable.
Right.
So the media campaign that we did, that's ongoing. The trainings, ongoing. Everything is ongoing. We're continuing to increase our train the trainers so that we have more people in their counties who are taking the training and then going out into their communities. One of the most great experiences that I've had doing presentations was going to different libraries. So we put out a email letter saying, we're offering this training. It doesn't cost anything, and if you'll have us, we'll come any day, anytime, so forth. So it was a lot of late nights. I'm from South Jersey. It was usually up in North Jersey, but they were the great groups of people who were there because they just wanted to be there.
Well, it's good to know that people are really hopping on board and are keeping their minds open and realizing that it's happening. And unfortunately, now it seems like there are the cases to show.
Yes.
That, listen, it happened here, it happened in our backyard. New Jersey, as I understand, is so susceptible because we're near so many big cities.
Yep.
So,
and we have easy access. We have our interstates, our airports.
right.
I was at Atlantic City Airport just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they're bringing people to Atlantic City. So we have it all.
There's so much that we can continue to talk about it, and we will continue to talk about human trafficking throughout the year because we are very passionate about keeping this word out. And there's so much that Kathy and I didn't touch on because it is a very big subject. So I want to thank you, and I would like to present this gift from our Soups and Sweets department at JFCS to everyone involved in helping our program happen today. The Soups and Sweets department is a culinary training program designed for young adults with special needs. We teach skills necessary for gainful employment, food service, and hospitality, as well as providing internship opportunities. If anyone's interested in placing an order for these delicious cookies or any of our soups, you can contact JFCS at 856-424-1333 and mention Soups and Sweets. And once again, I want to thank Kathy so much for joining us and for you joining us today. And remember, love shouldn't hurt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.